Buenos días. Ohayou gozaimasu. Buongiorno. Did I forget any languages? What's it? Hola. Oh, goodness, yes, of course. What's in Arabic? What's Arabic? Okay, very good. All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. So what we're going to do is, as you may know, we have three absolutely brilliant panelists here. So we're going to have a little bit of a conversation, talk about languages and intercultural proficiency and all this kind of cool stuff. Before we get started, a couple of things. First of all, when you exit, when we're done here, please exit behind this wall. There are double doors that take you out into the plaza. So please don't exit the way you came in, because that will create a bottleneck. So just come out this way and out into the plaza. And then, of course, we want you to have plenty of time to answer questions, and not to answer questions, to ask questions, potentially answer questions. So the way we're going to do this, we have one of our volunteers, Tatiana. She has cards and pens. If you have a question at any time during this, starting now if you wish, raise your hand. Tatiana's going to come and give you a pen and a card. You can keep the pen. And then on the card, just write your first name, write the school you're from, and then write your question. Pass it back to Tatiana. She's going to collect those, hand them to me, and then I'm going to ask our panelists on your behalf. Make sense? Yes. Raise hand, receive card and pen, write, keep pen, return card. Okay? All right, cool. So let's get started. So my name is Tim Janza. I'm here from Georgia State University, and I'm going to be moderating this today, our panel, and our three panelists, just kind of introduce him very briefly. William D. is actually a graduate from World Languages and Cultures here at Georgia State. He received his BA in German and has since worked, or has been working as a consultant for a Porsche consulting company, did an internship in Germany, and then also now just returned recently from a long-term assignment in Germany where he consulted with a huge German automaker, so really exciting. Then we have Nozomi Morgan, who's the CEO of Michiko Morgan Worldwide, and what she does, she helps international organizations improve quality, performance, and profitability. I'm sure she'll talk a little bit more about this in a bit, and she's also a regular contributor to Forbes.com and the Huffington Post, and she got an MBA from the Yale School of Management. It's also very accomplished. And then we have, mutter. And then we have Chichi Okezi. Ms. Okezi, she's the owner and producer of Simple Networking, and she specializes in business networking, diversity and inclusion, and cultural competency. And she also blogs as the champion networker. So if you want to learn about networking, Nozomi is extremely skilled. Chichi is also extremely skilled, so they're the people to go to. She's received multiple awards, and she's also an alumna from Emory University. So the way we're going to do this, let's turn these microphones on. The first part, I'm just going to ask them a few questions and ask them to kind of talk briefly about their backgrounds. And so the first thing I wanted to know is, how have language skills helped in your career? Because we're all here, right, for that. How can languages help us? Why are they important? And I don't know, so we'll just go ladies first. Okay. Chichi, would you like to start?
Okay. Good morning, bonjour. So I'm glad to be here. I'm excited for this event. In regards to Tim's question, language has played a very important part in my consulting and doing different types of workshops and training. I majored in French cultural studies when I was at Emory, and I got a chance to study abroad in Paris, and I actually still keep in touch with my French family. So it's been 20 years. And what I do is that when I talk about networking and cultural awareness, I use a lot of my French application, such as arts, entertainment, different types of grammar to express networking and definitely communication, both verbal and nonverbal. So for example, the word in French for, do we know what the word for French, or my French scholars here, do you know what the word for dress yourself means in French? Se habiller, correct. Bravo. So, but did you know that that's where we get our word habit from, right? So when I do a seminar, I talk about how we use our habits as a form of how we dress ourselves. So this is how people are able to recognize us. This is how we stay consistent and how we can build trust and credibility, right? Okay, so.
Tim, can you repeat the question again, just to
Yeah,
make sure?
so how, I mean, it's kind of an easy question for you to answer for all of our panels, but how have language skills really affected or helped you in your career
Yes.
and intercultural skills?
Yes. So my name is Nozomi Morgan, and Nozomi means hope in Japanese. So everyone, now you know at least one word in Japanese today, Nozomi. And you can impress your friends with that. So for me, actually, Japanese, I say it's actually, but Japanese is my native language. I was born and raised in Japan, and English is my second language. So but if we just talked on the phone, a lot of times people think I'm very American because of the way I speak and because I don't have a typical Japanese accent. So that alone gave me the opportunity to be here today. So how it really helped my career is that, first of all, when I was in college, because of my English ability, I was able to secure a lot of great so-called part-time jobs. For example, I was really interested in media at that time, so I worked for the national broadcasting company in Japan, which is called NHK. So it's like the PBS, the BBC out here. That was because I could speak Japanese and English. And also that led to doing part-time translating gigs, for example, at like master tennis tournaments, where I got to meet these tennis pros. It led to a lot of different opportunities, and the biggest one I would say in college for me, and this will totally tell my age, which I'm totally happy to share, but was I had the opportunity to work for the Nagano Olympics in 1998. It's before probably you were all born. So I worked with CBS and was on their special VIP team to handle their VIP clients that came all the way from the US to Nagano. So that alone, just as a college student, those are the opportunities because I was able to speak the language. And not just, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, language ultimately is a tool. And I know Tim earlier was talking a little bit about this, but it's not about being perfect. It's a tool that will open the doors to many, many opportunities. And that experience that I had in college led to building the confidence to go out there and pursue my career, which I was in marketing and business strategy. And that led to a long story, make it a little bit shorter, to coming to the States to pursue my MBA at Yale, and then working for a global company here, at Delta Airlines, and then also then starting my own company, which is a consulting firm, working with global corporations here in the US and also in Japan. So that language skill itself, especially with English, for me, because English is my second language, has opened up the doors, really literally, to the whole world.
Good morning, everyone. So we've learned a little bit of French and a little bit of Japanese. I guess we'll learn some German now. The Germans have a funny way of having words for concepts. And one of my favorite words is Feierabendbier, which means the beer that you drink after you're done working. So there you go. Now, how my language skills and the cultural aptitude have really helped me in my career. Really the fact that people needed people that spoke German in Atlanta. Atlanta has over 400 German companies, and they just needed people that spoke German. And this all started, way back when I was in Georgia State, and I took an internship in Germany because I spoke German for Kentucky Fried Chicken. No, I was not frying chicken most of the time. I spent a lot of time doing market research because they wanted to know how Americans think, or how good American products to bring over to the German market. And then I came over back to the United States after that internship, and I got hired up by Porsche because they needed someone who spoke German. And they needed someone to help with documents and working with German companies because the majority of the companies that I worked with when I was at Porsche are very small German-only companies, and a lot of the people didn't speak very good English. And they needed someone who could speak German and understand the German culture. And for me personally, the understanding of a cultural difference is far more important than understanding the language. And I think understanding the language can actually, it brings cultural understanding. And being an American, growing up in an American household, and then spending so much time working and living in Germany and being around Germans, the Germans are very different people. And if I were not to understand their differences, and if I could not understand how they interact and how they work, I would not be where I am today. You know, for example, in the United States, and this is such a great example, and it's what every German cultural person ever brings up, you know, emails. In the United States, if I were to talk to somebody and send an email to somebody that I have not spoken to in a couple weeks, you know, it'd start off with, you know, hey Pete, how you doing? How's your dog? You know, I heard something about, you know, your kid's doing well in their honor class. You know, I really hope you're doing well. By the way, I have a question about this item that you were supposed to email me. I don't know, have you had the time to do that? You know, let's grab a beer sometime. Talk to you later. Bye. Will. You know, the Germans, on the other hand, would say, Pete, you forgot to send me that document. Please send it now. Thank you. You know? And a lot of times, you know, as an American, if you get that email, you're like, oh, geez, what did I do? And that's just how the Germans are. And, you know, without being able to understand that and without being able to speak the language, you know, it would be very difficult to be where I am now. And that's really, you know, the big understanding or the big answer to that question, Tim, is that being able to speak the language and understand the culture, it helps you connect, it helps you communicate, and it helps you live outside of our tiny little bubble in the United States. And, you know, it is a tiny bubble, as Tim was talking about earlier.
Let's, by the way, don't forget to ask questions. Write your questions, raise your hand if you have any questions. They'll pass the little cards around, and feel free to, you know, write your cards. You can keep a pen, right? So don't forget that. Let's talk about communication. I think we all kind of, language is one thing, and as Ms. Morgan already indicated, language is one thing, intercultural issues are another. So, and Mr. D just kind of referred to some of the traps and some of the pitfalls, right, that you sometimes have for like email communication. You know, high context, low context stuff. You know, how explicit are you? How much is understood? And I believe this definitely, we talked about this briefly earlier, Ms. Okezi, is the how this affects networking, right? Maybe the three of you can talk about like things you tell your clients or your colleagues about how to effectively communicate between languages and what the pitfalls are, maybe a little bit. Would you kind of talk? We could just kind of, I mean, it doesn't really matter, but.
Sure, so when it comes to communications, and I'm talking especially, it also depends on the industry. So if I'm doing an intercultural or cultural competency workshop or webinar, I want to focus on not just what you're saying, but also how you're saying it. So I even had an opportunity to teach French classes in the evening at Georgia Tech through their options program. And one of the things that I told my students the first day is, first of all, we're going to speak French. So we're not speaking English with French words. There's a different style, there's a different way, there's a different approach. And I always recommend that when you're learning a language, you start with a live instructor, because they can tell you these different nuances, these different ways of how to be respectful and how to speak, and also how to pronounce words properly, and that you're using them in the right context. The other thing is that when you go abroad, and a few of you have been abroad, you want to assimilate, you want to be effective in the culture without losing your identity, but at the same time you have to go and be respectful. And of course, you have to follow their laws, because it's different in the United States as opposed to going abroad. So these are some of the things that I talk about. And even when I stayed with my French family, it was a different experience living with a family as opposed to staying in what we call pension, or a boarding house, or a hostel, if you will, because you just can't get up and go anytime you want. You have to let someone know that you're going somewhere. And you may think, oh, but I'm grown. I'm grown. But at the same time, you know, you're in someone else's home. So you're not just in a hotel, you're not in a space. It's very community oriented. And even earlier, one of the students was talking about French meals. So average French meal is about 2.5 to 3 hours. And you can imagine I can eat in 15 minutes or less. So I always tell, like you said, some of my clients that things that we're used to, that we're accustomed to, are going to be slightly different. Everything from mealtime to even how you speak and talk to someone, or even the way that you count. So for my French scholars, how do you count in French? Right. You start with your thumb. Right. You don't start with your index finger. Okay? So imagine if you're abroad and you have to count something and you start counting with your index finger, they're going to know off the bat that you're not French, right? Okay, so just different types of verbal and nonverbal communication.
This is a fun one. Boy, have I gotten myself in trouble with some of these things. A great example for just verbal communication and how things can be so different. In German, the dialects in German are absurd. They have different words for a lot of different things. And I spent a lot of time in southwestern Germany. I have some family there. I worked over there. That's where my parent company is from. And they have a special dialect over there, and the word that they use, the dialect that they say for not, to negate something. So that's not good, or that's not nice, or that's, we never do that, or something like that, is the same word that proper Germans use for nice. And so I'd be down there, and I'm thinking to myself, geez, these guys aren't having very good conversations, but they're saying everything is really nice, and I have no idea what's going on. And you'll be in meetings, and they'd say, we can't do that, that's not good. And then I'd be like, great, let's go. And they'd look at me like, no. So that's to be able to to understand that. And the only ways you learn those things is to be there and to experience those things, and not be afraid of making those mistakes. I mean, as far as that goes, that's probably my biggest thing here, is don't be afraid to make those pitfalls. They make really good stories later on when you're talking to people. And another great thing for cultural-wise, outside of communication, the Germans are very strict about a lot of things. And one of the things that I love the most is that if you're at a crosswalk, you don't move across the street until the crosswalk sign tells you to. It doesn't matter if it's 3 o'clock in the morning and there's no traffic and it's nothing there. You don't go. And the first time I was in Germany, I would walk across the street and I'd hear whispers behind me of all like the old German people looking at me like, oh man, what is that? What is that guy doing? Like, whoa, that's not right. And that I found out that that's a big no-no in Germany. So that's again, you can't experience these things until you go out there and to live it. And don't be afraid to go out there and to make these pitfalls. They're kind of embarrassing, but what's life without a little discomfort?
So actually, Germans and Japanese have a lot in common. We're rule followers to the T. So no one jaywalks. You always have to follow the signal. So especially with Japanese culture, one of the biggest differences that I see between, say, American culture is that we're very, very indirect. And that also comes through with our nonverbal communication. So for example, Japanese will never look into your eyes when they communicate. So, you can be speaking and you're friendly and all that. In the States, even like this close, I'll look into your eyes, and that's how you're acknowledging. But in Japan, you'll see, if I was on a panel, you'll see everyone looking down like this, and I'll be talking like this the whole time. And a lot of times that's very uncomfortable for Americans or a lot of other people who come from a more direct communication culture. And they'll keep on trying to get their attention and look around. And actually, I have a client that I'm working with right now that's delivering a presentation in Japan. It's a big mission for them, is to help them to understand that that's going to actually push them back, tick them off. So there are some of those adjustments that you have to do. But the key to that is sometimes in those intercultural situations, then you become like, oh, I'm right, you're wrong. Or this is our way is the right way, and their way is not the right way. And I think the most important thing to understand in intercultural situations or these cultural environment is that there is no right and wrong. Everyone's right in their own ways. The only thing is they're different. So I talk a lot about the difference of our world views. So we see the world differently. And so in Japan, so following the rules is the right thing to do, but in the States, it's not like it's wrong, but it's kind of a silly thing to do, right? In 3 a.m. and there's no traffic. So the key to that is just like you said and Will said, is really to be curious instead of being judgmental or critical. So that's what I tell to everyone that goes out there. Don't be afraid, like they both shared. Really be curious. Is there something different? Instead of judging, the first thing I would love you to ask is, why do they do that? Where does this come from? And that will help you, that desire to learn about others will help you to learn more about the culture. And that will help you to better understand the language. Like, why do they eat dinner for 2.5 to 3 hours? Why is that important to them? Because there's something in their culture that makes it important. And again, it's not right or wrong, it's just different. And if you come from there, I think it also eases the pressure that you have to know everything. Because trust me, it's impossible to know every aspect of a different culture.
Cool. Well, we have a ton of questions. Thank you all so much. We won't be able to get around to them. Let's start with two that are really, really easy, like one-word answers. What do you think? And this is from Alonzo, can your salary increase if you speak multiple languages?
Yes.
Missouri?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Aha, done. Good. At what age did all of you begin learning a second language?
13?
13, yeah?
13, yeah.
I started actually at a very, very young age, and I started my third language in high school.
So my first language is English. My parents are Nigerian immigrants. So I grew up in a bilingual home. So I guess I started learning Igbo when I was maybe 1 or 2 years old, and then learned French when I started middle school in Brooklyn. So 11 is when I learned French.
Okay. And how long would y'all say did it take you to become, you know, the word fluent is always a little tricky, right? And this is a question from Jamal. To be functional in a language, what do you say? Like, how long did it take you to functional in German?
I'd say 5 years. After 5 years, I would be okay handling conversations. I mean, functional in what aspect? I mean, just
So you feel comfortable being around and can function in the country?
5 years, for me at least.
Mike? Oh.
5 years.
Yeah, that's a difficult question. English, I learned it very young, so it's really hard to tell. I actually did study, I hate to say this, my third language that I studied was German. I started in high school, I did it in college too. I actually studied in Germany too. So at that time, so probably like 5 years, I was pretty good at it, but I don't use it anymore, so I don't remember. I've also studied Cantonese and Mandarin. I studied in Hong Kong for a year, and I lived in a dorm with only Cantonese speakers, so that really accelerated the process. So a year took me I could do really conversational, I could live pretty comfortably there.
Okay, so for me, it's a duality for me. I learned a foreign language at home, and then I also learned another one in school. So I can tell the difference between learning it informally and formally. For my parents' language, I can't read and write in Igbo, but I would say it took, growing up 2, 3, maybe 2 years. For French, because I was older, it took a little bit longer to learn. So I would have to say I learned it in middle school, so I'll give it like 3 years for the French piece.
All right, so now let's get a little bit more into the weeds of it. So there's two questions that kind of go together a little bit. One question is from Oliver at Lassiter. And he asked, what motivates you when you're learning a language? So, you know, a lot of us, it's tricky, right? Motivation, like why are we learning? Why are we doing these things? Well, because our grade depends on it, or because it's a requirement, because we have to. But I think there's a lot more to it. And then the other one is, especially when you're learning your second or third foreign language, kind of like, how do you muster the courage? And this is something that Jesus said from Dalton. And how do you just take the initiative? So all this has to do with motivation. How do you get motivated to learn, to go abroad, to go about it, other than just somebody telling you that you have to do it? What was your motivation?
Travel. You know, I wanted to be able to see the world. My dad's an airline pilot. He's been all over the world. He's seen everything. And, you know, I love the European culture. And, you know, the Central Europe, a big part of Central Europe speaks Germanic languages. And just to be able to go to somewhere and not be tied to a dictionary or something like that, being able to just explore, learn, and see the world. It's really an incredible sense the first time you go abroad and you're not worried about not being able to communicate. And the freedom that that gives you is absolutely insane. Whenever I leave, you know, German-speaking countries, I start to get a little anxious about not being able to communicate. But, you know, to be in Germany, Austria, I'm not going to say Switzerland because they don't speak German. Some of you got that. But, you know, that freedom is nice to have. So that's a big motivation for me.
For me, it was really, I wanted to see a same thing, but I wanted to see the world and wanted to be able to experience the world. So that was one thing was really important to me, even in college, was to do backpacking all around the world with my friends or even by myself. And for that, English was really important, but also, and this is a great story of how your life turns out a completely different way. But I was really interested in working for the United Nations when I was in high school. So that was another thing you needed to know 3, I think, languages out of the 6. So I really wanted to make sure I understood English, and then I was also looking for Chinese at that time. So really it comes from the desire. So because I'm Japanese, I'm involved with the Japanese speech contest that's held in Georgia. And for those students, they are able to speak Japanese fluently in about like a year. It's amazing. And their motivation actually is anime. So they've learned Japanese through watching anime and YouTube. And I'm like, are you kidding me? It took my whole life being Japanese to learn, but it doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be like a fancy, you know, like big career, you know, motivation. It doesn't matter what it is. Whatever you love is perfect.
Oh, my motivation it's different. I had to take French when I was in middle school, or else, you know, I wouldn't move on to 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And I actually learned it when I was 11, but I didn't actually travel till I was 20. So that was 9 years in the making. And what worked for me was self-expression. I had a different way of expressing myself, and also music. So my dad had albums from artists from the Congo, which, if you're familiar with that, for my French scholars, 80% of the French-speaking countries are in Africa. So I would see the writing, I'd hear the music, so that was a way for me to want to continue to learn the language. And then also, because when my dad traveled to Nigeria and he came back to the United States, he gave me a magazine in French. And he said, yeah, you're taking French, why don't you read this? And of course I was like, oh, this looks really interesting. So you kind of feel grown up, you kind of feel like, oh, okay, I can do this. And so that was my motivation until I actually traveled, was self-expression and then being able to interpret French music and read different magazines. And then you look so cool when you're in an airport, or you're in, you know, you go to a newsstand and you ask for, oh, can I have French Vogue, and not just Vogue.
So we won't be able to get around to all the questions, of course, but there's a kind of common theme with a lot of the questions, and that is, how do you deal, from multiple people, how do you kind of deal with adapting and adjusting to those different cultures? Where do you start? Like, when you're you know, either in the workplace, you deal with people from other cultures, or you're actually abroad. How do you, what strategies would you recommend maybe to help adjust to the culture? Yeah, Nozomi.
So actually, I'll start with saying, because I spoke English pretty well when I came for business school, I was 30, turning 31, and I could speak English pretty well. So I thought I would adapt perfectly well, right? I've seen, I've learned all about America through TV and movies. One of the things I learned during college, or high school and college, I watched Beverly Hills 90210 and Melrose Place and all those really, or Ally McBeal, all these, so they showed those programs in Japan too, like probably a couple of years later, or maybe 5, 10 years later. So that's how I kept up and learned my English. So I thought I knew America very, very well. So when I got here, actually, I didn't realize I had a huge cultural shock. And to be honest, I completely failed my first year of business school. I mean, I went through it, and I did graduate, but I felt like a complete failure. I had the most miserable time of my life, to be honest. So from what I learned from that is, one, know that adapting into a new culture is absolutely, it means it's very hard to do. So don't think it's easy, not to scare you, but to know that it's okay, that it's really hard. So really ask for help, and actually being honest that it's hard and you're really not feeling comfortable, you don't know what to do, you know, talking about that, asking for help for the local friends, with your other students or you know, exchange students or whatever your situation is, or colleagues at work. It's absolutely okay, and the sooner you let go of your ego and be okay to say, hey, I really don't have no clue what's going on, your life will be easier. And I learned it a very hard way, but that'll be my lesson or teaching.
You can't prepare unless you're there. And you know, you can watch as much you know, for me, German TV as you want. You can read as much German publications. You can hang out with as many Germans as you want. But none of that's going to tell you that in Germany they have square pillows for some ungodly reason. You know, I don't get it. Where does all the pillow go? Anyway, I mean, you can hear about that all you want, but you know, the only way to get there, you know, you're learning a culture starts as soon as you step foot into that country. And the best advice is, you know, if you can go there, and then just be open. You know, like everyone's saying, you know, like I said earlier, and like you know, you've said, be open-minded. Don't be afraid to make a fool of yourself. You know, if you say, you know, hey, I'm just a dumb foreigner who's trying to get used to this place, a lot of the times people are going to go, oh, that's cute, let me show you around. And that's okay. You know, and also be prepared that 9 times out of 10, you'll never fully be immersed into the culture. You know, I've spent you know, a good part of my life with Germans, an uncomfortably large amount of my life with Germans, and a lot of time in Germany with Germans and stuff like that. And, you know, I was over there for you know, a long time over the summer, and I was still getting culture shock. You know, one time, for example, you know, Germans, they recycle everything. They have these receptacles where you can return bottles and get a deposit back. And the Germans are extremely blunt. And they're not very patient people either. And I'm sitting there in line, and this old dude was letting his kid put the bottles in. The kid would always put it in the wrong way. And another old guy behind him started getting mad. And he's like, oh, what are you doing letting the kid do this? You know, don't you see that there's a line here? People have got places to be. And I'm thinking to myself, dude, it's a Saturday. You got nowhere to be. And he's starting to make up a fit. And then he looks at me and goes, am I right? And I go, dude, I don't know anything. Leave me alone. And I get back to my apartment, and I immediately, you know, text my wife. I'm like, listen, these people are crazy. And, you know, it's okay to have that, and it's fun, and it's exciting, and be adventurous, but, you know, be open-minded. That's the best advice, and go, travel, experience the world.
Make it quick. When I was going, it's to your point, everyone's point, you just have to go open-minded. You have to be extremely patient, and you have to just let your ego go. Example I'll give, when I first came to Paris, when I went to Paris, and their showers are different. So it's not stuck to the wall, it's handheld. Think of like when you go to get your hair done or you're washing your hair. So I tore up the bathroom the first day, and I was like, oh God, it is day 2. It's day 2. And then also just going to the ATM. I'm still thinking I'm in America. So I'm looking at the ATM, it's in French, and I was like, okay, I gotta find the American flag. American flag is not there. It's the British flag, Union Jack, but I'm looking past it. I'm like, where's the American flag? Where's the American flag? Stars and stripes, come on, I can't. So it's your mindset. You really have to change your mindset, I think, more than anything. And then just always being open, don't be afraid. And then the time that I was going, they were switching from the French franc to the euro. Okay.
Yeah, I remember that when they did that in Germany as well. I'd already lived in the US for a while, and I came back and I still had my marks, and I was like, oh, crap, I can't use those. And then I was at the post office, and I was kind of like, okay, so they were looking at me because I knew I was German, but they were looking at me like, you don't know numbers? I was like, well, is this a fifth? What is it? I felt like a complete idiot. But I wanted to maybe add something to that. One of the things that I learned just only recently when I went to Japan, and it really kind of brought it home, is watch, listen. Just try to read between the lines and try to, like, okay, why did that person just do this? That's weird. I wouldn't have expected that. This is like, try to figure out and try to understand why the differences are there. So for example, when I went to Japan, we had a meeting at Soka University in Hachoji, and we sat there in the meeting, and unlike us, who are deathly afraid of silence, Japanese are not. And so we were, saying a few things, ask a question, and then they gave a very brief answer. Normally in America, it's like, so what is it that you do? Oh, I do this and this, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, well, I take care of international programs. And you see, like after 5 seconds, you get antsy, right? But in Japan, it's fine. And Ms. Morgan and I were talking about that a couple of months ago, and she said, yeah, they're just like, oh. And then at some point, they might reveal more. That was one of the things I noticed, and we talked about it, and I said, well, yeah, it's okay over there. It's fine, right? So just be aware and listen and watch what people do, and then we figure out why they're doing these things. So I have one last question to kind of wrap things up a little bit. And this has to do with networking, or also kind of forging relationships. This is from Sam at Lassiter. So how do you begin networking? How do you begin forging relationships, especially in a career thing? I mean, y'all are really young. You're about to go up over into the exhibitor hall. So what do you do, right? What kind of tips, maybe some kind of strategies could you recommend?
Embarrass yourself. Because you're going to find that one person who looks at you and goes, oh, God, and they're going to take care of you. And then for the rest of the time, you're going to have that one little person. And, again, don't be afraid, and I keep saying that, I'm repeating myself, don't be afraid to make a fool of yourself. Because the people there, they're not aliens. Well, it depends on the definition of the word alien. But, they want to help you. And then on top of that, don't be afraid to just talk, communicate, ask questions. Don't go over cultural boundaries. Like in Germany, you don't ask somebody, hey, how you doing all the time, because they're going to tell you how they're doing. In the United States, I see a cashier and I go to them and I go, hey, how you doing? And they go, hey, how you doing? And that's it. In Germany, I go, how are you doing? And either the cashier is going to go, none of your business, or they're going to tell me about their sick kid. But that's the kind of thing. Talk. Don't be shy and make mistakes and look for that person who's going to help you out, and that person's going to be a lifelong friend of yours. That's my experience.
Who here in the room does not like networking? Raise your hand. So you all like networking? Yes? Who, thank you for the honest people. Who here has done networking before? Okay. Who, good, okay, awesome. Who here is afraid of networking? Okay, we're warming up, we're getting honest. No, I'm kidding. So I think networking is a big word and is kind of misunderstood. Really, networking is just a human-to-human interaction. That's what it really is. So I would say don't worry about the word networking. When you go out there, when you meet companies, or you meet associations, you meet schools, colleges, really the key is coming back to your desire. Why are you here? And really being curious. So it's not about selling you, and it's not about telling how amazing you are, because we all know that you are amazing. You're there to get to know the other side, the company or the school, whoever you're talking to. So really being curious, and I think that goes back to the theme with culture too, is just being curious. Who are they? What are they thinking? What do I want to know? So my biggest advice would be just don't censor yourself. Don't think, oh, that's a stupid question. If I ask this question, they'll think I'm really stupid, I don't know anything. There's not a stupid question. Right? No? But really, just be yourself, ask questions that you want, be curious, and everything will just be fine.
Just to wrap up, so this is a great program, and I don't know if the students or the teachers got access to it, but I know we did. There was a teacher's toolkit within the registration to where they had the agenda for the day, as well as questions that the students or that you guys could ask to the different vendors and the different exhibitors. So that's another great way, preparing for an event, preparing to meet someone, general questions that they may ask, being able to answer those type of questions. And then also networking in school, joining groups and organizations in school and even outside of school in the community. That's also a form of networking as well. And then looking for mentors, looking for people that you aspire to be or that you like their career and want to learn more about it, and connecting with them. So those are some my networking tips.
So maybe the very last question for the last couple of minutes, just 30 seconds or less. What do you wish you had known when you first embarked on learning a language, learning about another culture? If you could go back in time to your younger self and kind of give yourself some advice, what would that be? Because like what you are is them. I mean, you're right? You're them. You are them at some point, right? So what do you think? What would it be that you would advise yourself?
So my advice would be to, gosh, that's tough.
It's just tough.
I would say it's kind of good that you don't know. I think that if I knew that my French family didn't speak English, I would not have gone. To live abroad with someone that did not speak English, even though, yes, I went to French class, but this is for real. This is not for play. So, and my biggest challenge was when they left to, and I'll make this quick, when they left to go like on vacation, because you're in France, so to go to another country is 30 minutes, an hour, or it doesn't even, there is no time, because if you go from Paris to London, it takes an hour, and they're an hour back. So you leave Paris at 7 a.m. and you get to London at 7 a.m., okay? So my thing was, it's best that I don't know. Because if I knew, I would not have gone. I wouldn't go through these type of experiences, and it would make me even more anxious. So I wouldn't tell myself anything.
You're so funny. I love it. I would say really fall forward. Take risks, do it. The only time because a lot of times we are afraid to fail, but really there's no failure. The only time you fail, or the definition of fail, is when you quit. So as long as you keep on moving forward, if you keep on falling forward, you're always moving forward. So it's completely okay. So I would tell, because I was such a risk-averse person, I was so afraid to, to look stupid or do something wrong. I think I missed a lot of opportunities to grow, and I had a very narrow, I think, view. So that's one thing. And another thing would be comfortable of being uncomfortable. It's absolutely okay to be uncomfortable. When you're uncomfortable, that shows that you're in the right place. So really be comfortable being uncomfortable. Uncomfortable is not a bad place to be. Actually, it's the exact place you should be.
For me, I'm going to go ahead and apologize in advance for all the teachers, students. When you're learning a language and everything like that, forget about the grades. Your goal is to communicate. I'm sorry. No, but hold on now.
It's easy for him to say, right?
There's a point to that. The point of learning a language, and all this is communication. And if you can learn to communicate, and if you focus on communicating and being able to communicate, the good grades will come out of that. And if you focus on just getting good grades and just memorizing vocabulary and just memorizing grammatical structures and stuff like that, you're not learning a language and you're going to forget about it. One day you're going to get out of class and you're going to be able to talk and just communicate a concept. And when you do that, it's amazing. And when you re-look at your classes and it's not about getting good grades or making mom and dad or your teacher happy, and when you realize this is a lifelong skill and you learn that it's about communication, the good grades will come out of that because they're grading you on how well you're able to communicate. Focus on that. Don't focus on the grades. Focus on being able to communicate a concept and communicate culture and to be able to exist in a world that doesn't just speak English.
All right. Well, with that, I would say merci d'être venu ce matin. Kite kurete, arigatou gozaimasu. Danke, dass du gekommen bist. Ja, wir sehen uns ja später noch. Thank you all for having been here. I hope we answered some of your questions.